evening, everyone. Welcome to the TIFA informational presentation tonight. I'm going to be the moderator, Charles Signori. Our panel here that we have with us tonight is going to be John Starren, attorney of law and TIFA laws out of Oakland County. We have Dan Casey with the EDA, St. Clair County. And then we have Jennifer Rigterink. Okay, she's with the MML of Michigan. And these three are what we consider knowledgeable people in the TIFA laws and the TIFA program that is currently available. There is new laws coming starting in January of 2019 that we're all learning, and we thought it'd be a good time to bring these folks in and hopefully answer some questions that you guys have and the TIFA board. I'm going to try and stay as quickly as possible to the questions, stay neutral in this, and hopefully we can all get through this and learn something. You know, the question before us is not whether the City Commission can dissolve the TIFA or whether should they. And that's what we're kind of trying to find out, what everybody else is doing, what's right and what's wrong. And can we start a new TIFA maybe in 2019, if that's something viable. I'd also like to take time right now to acknowledge the Mayor Pro Tem, Lisa Hendricks is here with us tonight. I also have Commissioners Clausen, Mr. Avery, Mrs. Lepley, Mr. Turner, and Mrs. Callahan. Thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can all, like I said, learn something. We have a little slideshow that has been put together here with some interesting facts of what's going on in the country, the world, California, Canada, just different areas of the United States and different things that are going on. So I'm going to ask that the Vertons, who graciously are our hosts tonight, Kathy and Tom, we appreciate all your help in doing this, your due diligence. And as we talk and go through this, they can go ahead and play this slideshow here, and it can keep going. And as you get bored of listening to me, take time to read that and take a glance at it throughout the evening. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and you'll have to bear with me. My eyesight isn't the greatest. And here we go. Is there any questions anybody has about how we're going to do this? We are going to put all the questions on a card. If you have a question that I don't have a card for, just please raise your hand. Somebody will bring you out a pen and a paper, and they'll be happy to give it to you. Write down your questions, and we will give it to the panel. Okay? Yes?
I was kind of hoping just to begin with that maybe someone could explain TIFA, like a real basic, TIFA 101 kind of explanation.
Sure, and I've got a few cards in here with that.
Okay.
But you know what? That's a good way to start. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to ask that John Starren answer that question if he could for us, start us out.
Well, I would be happy to, and I was going to. Oh, I know. I wonder why these. How's that? Is that better?
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I'll be happy to try to answer that, and I'm thinking my other panelists may have some comments they want to.
Hold the mic up to your mouth, please.
Yeah, others may have comments that they want to add. But basically, what TIF is, it stands for Tax Increment Financing Authority. Under Michigan law, there are a number of different types of tax increment financing authorities. Reference was made to how the law is changing. Actually, it's already been changed. It's going to go into effect next year to try to bring things more under one umbrella, with the idea that that will simplify things. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But basically what the premise is we all pay property taxes. And when we pay those property taxes, we may be paying just one tax bill, but when those taxes are collected, they get divvied up and allocated to all the different public agencies. The schools get their cut, the county gets their cut, the local government gets their cut, different agencies get whatever their millage is, and they all use it for public purposes. What TIFA does is it provides the ability for capture of what are called tax increments. As property increases in value, your taxes go up proportionately. And under a TIFA program, the authority that's been created is allowed to capture those incremental increases. And those increases, instead of going to the county and those other agencies, with the exception of the schools, their taxes are not captured. They continue to go to the schools. But those other agencies, for instance, instead of going to the county, instead of going to the Marine City General Fund, instead that revenue goes to the authority, the TIFA authority, and that is what provides the funding, the seed money, if you will, for the TIFA to be able to do the projects that it does in order to enhance and redevelop the downtown area. If there was not a TIFA, then the funds would just go to, again, those original public agencies, and you wouldn't have this pot of money, this seed money, in order to do the programs and redevelopment type activities that the TIFA does. That's the legal answer. My co-panelists here may be able to give you more practical answers to the questions as to what the TIFAs actually do.
Thank you. My name is Dan Casey. I'm with the Economic Development Alliance in St. Clair County. And just a little background, earlier in my career, before going to the EDA, I worked for two cities. The first was the city of Southfield, and when I worked there in economic development, the city had 2 TIFA districts and they had 2 LDFA districts. And then when I moved to Rochester Hills, I worked there with John actually for about 7.5 years, and when I was there, I managed, as a part of my job, a local development finance authority. So basically in Michigan, there are 4 types of TIF type programs. The original one that was created in Michigan is TIFA, Tax Increment Finance Authority. Then there's a local development finance authority, which when they did away with creation of new TIFAs, they created LDFAs to replace them under Michigan law. The third type is a downtown development authority, and the last type is a brownfield authority. Brownfield authorities work on contaminated sites. So, for example, the Inn on Water Street was a contaminated site, so that is a area that taxes are captured to pay off certain eligible expenses, basically the cleanup. So a TIFA, as the original version, was intended to do a couple things. The first is it's focused on doing infrastructure projects and other municipal facilities that will support the district or the area that's been designated. So in Michigan, the proliferation of TIFAs was primarily in suburban and urban areas where you had communities that were interested in creating jobs They're interested in commercial development and also industrial development. So the job creation piece was important. And then the last point I wanted to make about that is that the primary purpose of a TIFA, if you will, is for public infrastructure. You can fund public facilities, things like police cars, city halls, libraries, and so forth. So you can do that, but the original intent of it was primarily the infrastructure that is needed to make that district functional and effective at generating tax revenue for the community as well as services and jobs. So that's basically what it was about. And then the notion was at the time when you create one of these, any of those 4 types, what happens is you create a baseline value of all of the properties that are in the district. So you look at the taxable value of each and every property and you establish that as a baseline. And then theoretically and historically in Michigan, every year that goes by when those properties get reassessed, they typically increase in value by a certain percentage. On average in Michigan, it's 2 to 3% per year. And so that increase can be captured to be used to fund projects that you put in a plan. One of the real values of these types of agencies is if you have new development or expansion, because that's where you really jump in value. Everything else is very slow and incremental, so existing buildings, very slow and incremental increases. But where communities really see values when you have new construction, because that's brand new revenue coming out of the tax rolls. So last point I want to make is that the reason why these 4 programs exist is because they are providing a strategic tool to the community, typically over a long period of time. So as the community looks at their growth and their needs, especially as it relates to things like roads and water and sewer, which you typically capitalize over 30-year with bonds and so forth, long periods of time, right? So these programs are a way to help fund those kind of improvements by over time capturing those increments. And in other ways, that frees up general fund revenue for the community that they can then spend in other parts of the community outside of the district.
Clear as mud, right? So anytime you start talking about taxes, tax increment financing, and I'm sure we will use acronyms up here, so if we say something that you're like, what does that mean, just let us know. And because in economic development, if there's a lot of anything, there's a lot of acronyms. Just to reiterate what Dan said right here at the end is, the TIFA is really a strategic economic development tool. And when you think about at the state level, at the federal level, there's a lot of programs and incentive programs that you can apply for projects. A TIFA, a DDA, some of these other tax increment financing authorities, they're really our only local economic development, where it's truly a local authority and local control over that authority, compared to going to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation or one of the other authorities and having to go through their programs to try to compete with all the other municipalities in the state looking for dollars for projects.
Okay, did that answer your question? I hope, because it gave a lot of information, good stuff. All right, I'm going to start out with the first one here from Gary, who lives in Marine City. Can TIFA money be used to repair my sidewalks, as they are in dire need, disgrace to St. Clair County? Somebody want to take that one?
If the sidewalks are in the district, the answer is yes. If the sidewalks are outside of the district, the answer is generally no. One exception to that would be sidewalks that connect to the district, especially if your district is a main public road. The point at which the sidewalk connects to the district, that intersection, that area can be improved. But if you're talking about a residential community, for example, or a street that's not in the district, the answer is no.
Thank you. I'm gonna put a limit of 3 questions from each person. And if they have more than that, I'm gonna set it aside. If we have time, we'll come back to it. Gary from Marine City also has, how many Michigan cities have TIFA? And how many have quit TIFA?
So that would be a state Department of Treasury question. This authority has been around for a very long time. I do not have an exact number, but I will tell you there are only a handful of TIFAs throughout the state. As the Downtown Development Authority came available, Corridor Improvement Authorities, some of the other tax increment financing authorities, some communities had their boards develop or their authorities transform into a DDA versus a TIFA.
Thank you. Next question, again from Gary. Can TIFA money be used to repave many city bad roads as they are in the worst condition in St. Clair County? Same as sidewalks. Okay.
I was just going to say, it's probably the same answer that Dan
Same
Casey
thing?
gave
Okay.
before. If it's within the district, that would most likely rather be a legitimate use of it. Certainly some question as to how far the money that TIFA has would go. My experience, it's actually absolutely staggering how much it costs to repair roads. Typically, the TIFA would not be focusing so much on that type of basic infrastructure repair. That's something really that you would look to the city through the general fund and through special assessments and that type of thing to do. Typically, the TIFA would be spending money on other types of programs and infrastructure designed really specifically to stimulate economic growth, business growth, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Louise, and she's from Marine City. And it has here, how have the regulatory rules changed? And how would these changes affect the acceptable projects for Marine City?
So I work for the Michigan Municipal League, and I handle our legislative issues for local government that deal with economic development, land use planning, zoning, municipal services. I can tell you TIF capture, tax increment financing has been a fight in the legislature for the past almost decade, going back and forth because of the bigger municipal finance issue that we have in this state, where the state has really balanced its budget on the backs of local municipalities and not fully funding revenue sharing. And so that affects all taxing jurisdictions. That's why you have the counties wanting, we're fighting over scraps when it comes to TIF capture at this point. We're not talking really large sums of money compared to if you look at your county budget and then maybe the portion of tax of TIF that's going into your TIFA from the county. It's a very small portion of their actual budget. But the reforms that were done, all the different TIF acts, DDAs, Corridor Improvement Authorities, the LDFA, this past term, were all layered into one public act, PA 57 of 2018. And really it just took each individual act, layered them on top of each other, and then added a new section at the end dealing with reporting and transparency. So there will be, reporting has always been required for a tax increment financing authority or anybody else that's capturing TIF. And except there's really never been a hammer. So if you didn't report, nothing really happened to you. And so there are authorities throughout the state who haven't reported over the last decade or so. Going into effect January 1st, there will be a reporting form that all TIF, any authority capturing TIF will have to, you'll have to actually prepare it. It'll be a standard form. There's never been a standard form before. You will have to submit that within 6 months of your fiscal year end. That report will go to Treasury, the State Tax Commission. It'll also go to your governing body, so the city, as well as any other taxing jurisdiction whose taxes you're capturing. You will have to provide a copy of that report to those other taxing jurisdictions as well. There are also increased transparency requirements, so information needs to be on a website. I briefly Googled and found that your TIFA has a website, is on a web page. Meeting minutes are on there, meeting notices are on there. Those are all things that or other authorities have not been doing. Not all authorities, some, but these are now in the law that you have to be doing these things. If you're not doing them, you're gonna get a notice. There's a compliance timeline that you have to provide the information. If you don't, you will not receive your capture any longer, or you will have to give it back. If you go, I think it's 3 full years, with that 3rd year that you haven't reported, your TIF, your authority would actually be dissolved and have to, your local governing body would have to take action to put that authority back together again.
Thank you. The next question comes from Becky, and can the April 5th 4-3 vote to dissolve TIFA be revisited?
He's the lawyer.
Well, revisited's kind of a broad term. Certainly, the decision that the Marine City Council made is a discretionary decision. It was a split vote. They have voted to move forward with action. It would seem that if the council was so inclined to go in a different direction, they could do that. The precise way that they would go about that is something that they would be better guided by the advice of their own city attorney, Mr. Davis, who I know personally and I know is a very excellent attorney. But answering the question generally, can the council reverse tracks if it wanted to? They could certainly not necessarily reconsider, but rescind their action. They could terminate the TIFA and start a new program later on. I mean, all of these things are available to them. My understanding is that I believe the final capture has already occurred, so there would be no further tax capture given the direction the current program is going. So there would have to be some, I guess, reinstatement or change in direction. So I'm giving a long answer to a fairly simple question. The question is, can the city reverse tracks if it's so inclined to do so? Yes, they can. That's less of a legal question. It's really more of the question I think the moderator proposed to begin with. Can the city stop and terminate the TIFA? The answer to that, I think, clearly is yes. Legally, they can. Should they do so? That's really a discretionary decision. That is a policy decision for the city council to grapple with. And at this point, they've already made that decision to move ahead. If they want to change their mind, they certainly have the prerogative to do that.
How do they do it?
Oh, hold. Write it on a piece of paper, please. I don't want to get out of line here.
I'll have a piece of paper, please.
I'm sorry, I can't see, so I don't know. But I appreciate that, thank you. Okay, the next one here, again, is from Becky. Is there any benefit or deterrent to doing away with a TIFA?
Well, again, first of all, it's a tool that's intended to serve the community. And if it's no longer serving the community, then certainly you can do away with it, right? Everything has kind of a natural life. It really, and as I said it earlier, it's a strategic program. So if you see a need to continue to fund the roads and the water and the sewer lines and the upkeep of those maintenance or public facilities within the district, then you probably should keep it around. The one thing that you would lose by eliminating the TIFA is the county's capture. And my understanding is that's about $100,000 per year. So if you think about that in 1 year, you can say, yeah, I can do without that. Yeah, we can get by without it. But if you start adding that money up over 5 years or 10 years, now you're talking about being able to do significant maintenance or repair or replacement of a road or a sidewalk or things like that within the district. And by using that, the county's money to do that, you're basically saving your money to do something else that's a priority for the community.
So in looking at it being a tool, you can always put a tool on a shelf and you take that tool down when you need to use it. If you continue to capture the county and other taxing jurisdictions' money, if you don't have projects, you just revert that money back to that taxing jurisdiction. There's no reason if you don't have projects, you can give them those funds back, yet not dissolve your TIFA. Then when you have a project, your TIFA is there, you keep the capture like you're supposed to according to your plan, and you move ahead with your project. So you are able to give the taxing jurisdictions back their TIF that you're capturing if you don't have current projects without actually dissolving the TIFA and starting all over again at some point in the future.
I want to give you a nearby example of what she just said. Again, earlier I mentioned that there are 4 different types of these TIF organizations, or TIF types. One of them is a local development finance authority, which is intended for industrial development. So in the city of St. Clair, they established years ago an LDFA for what is called the Hawes Industrial Park. So that's at the corner of Yankee and Range Road. In that park, they put in water and sewer and a road, no sidewalks, and a road. After they paid off the bonds to put that infrastructure in, they said, okay, we're done for the moment. We don't have any other projects in our plan. So we're gonna keep the LDFA in place, but we're gonna turn the money back over to all the taxing jurisdictions for now. Well, today, it's 25, 30 years later, the road in the park is crumbling and is in bad shape, and the city needs to replace it. So what they can do is amend their plan. They can, again, issue bonds if that's what they choose to do, and they can repave the road and then pay for that over a number of years. So that's one of the reasons why you might not want to do away with TIFA, but you could, if you don't have any current projects to work on, you could take the money and you could give it back to taxing jurisdictions. Now, I am not a proponent of doing that personally, but I'm coming at it from an economic developer standpoint. And one of the things that we did when I was in Rochester Hills is we captured money and basically put it in the bank to pay for future replacement of those roads that we knew was going to happen. So we didn't just give it back to taxing jurisdictions. We put it in the bank and said every year it's going to grow and grow and grow, and 10 years from now, when it comes time to replacing that road, we've got the money, right? We don't have to bond for it, we don't have to do anything else, or maybe you'd have to bond for less, but you at least had some money saved up. So that's another way to look at it.
All right, thank you. All right, I got a card here from Richard from Marine City. Can TIFA bond out or be used to make payments on a bond the city has acquired?
So typically the authority would issue the bonds, not the city. But you can do that, and the TIFA enters into an agreement to repay the city for the bonds and the interest on the bonds. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that authorities can accept loans, they can accept donations of money, They can enter into payback agreements, so you could actually have the private sector fund something, right? And then TIFA pay them back over a period of time. So there's a number of different ways that you can use TIFA to meet your community's needs.
Great, thank you. This next question is to Jennifer. It's from Robert. Did any officials from the city contact you for input or information on this issue? For this issue, I'm assuming that the closure of TIFA.
So I received a call last week about this forum. Prior to that, no, I had not spoken with anyone in Marine City. I did check with our inquiry service just to see if anyone, we have an informational line, we get calls all the time from members about a whole breadth of local government issues. And Marine City has not contacted our inquiry service since 2015. So no, as far as I know, no one has talked to anyone at the league about this issue.
Thank you. This next card comes from James. TIFA is dissolved end of this year. What happens to the unused monies? Somebody want to answer that, just to make it clear. I know you talked about it.
Well, I can try to answer that question. The way the law reads is similar to what both Mr. Casey and Jennifer had answered before, to the extent that we have surplus tax capture revenues sitting in our account. Those monies have to be given back to the public agencies that they were captured from. So if we've got county money, we've got community college money, that sort of thing, sitting in the TIFA bank account, we'd have to give that money back to them. To the extent that the TIFA has other assets, I don't know if we do, but whether there is property that owns, or whether there may even be funds, monetary funds that came from other sources, through donations, through fundraisers, through sale of things, that sort of things. Those monies would go to the city upon the termination of the TIFA. So the tax captures go back to the original agencies that they were captured from. Any other assets would go to the city general fund, basically.
Thank you. I've got another card here from Terry. What advantages is there for Marine City to close TIFA? Is there any advantages of closing TIFA?
Well, to the extent that your money is currently restricted to being used in the district, if you close TIFA, you do lose the county's money, but at least in terms of the city's money that's captured within the district, you're then freed up to spend that through your general fund, through any other community priority.
Thank you. I have one from Craig. With the TIFA being closed in December, will the city be able to start a new one in the future?
I think the answer to that is yes. It wouldn't be exactly the way it is now, because again, the law has been changed, it's been phased out. But there are these other tax increment financing authorities that Dan ticked off earlier, and they're all a little bit different with different eligibility requirements, but in general, most communities can find a way to have a TIFA if it is so inclined to do so. So again, a long answer, the simple answer is yes, they could always go back to it in the future. It wouldn't be exactly the same. It would be a new program, a new plan would have to be developed, a new district would have to be developed. Basically, we would be starting from square one.
I do think you would have a harder time getting your county, the other taxing jurisdictions on board this time around. Again, going back to just the state of municipal finance, that you're capturing very limited funds. Right now, you're able to capture those. You would have a hard time getting sign-on from those taxing jurisdictions in the future.
That's true. There is one other advantage to keeping the TIFA going, and I touched on it earlier. By the way, I realize this is a really dry subject, by the way, and very complicated. I mean, if you had to read the law, you'd say, well, no wonder we have this guy saying it. So one of the advantages to keeping the TIFA, let's say you decide, 5 years from now, you want to do some project in the district and you've gotten rid of TIFA, now you got to start over. The first thing you do is you establish your baseline, right? What is the current value of all the properties? Because you can't capture that. You can only capture the increase over that in the future, right? So the advantage for you in keeping the TIFA is that your baseline was established, help me out, Elaine, what was it? 30 years ago. So the value of all of those properties in the district 30 years ago is far less than it is today. So if you keep it, you're going to be able to take advantage of that. But if you get rid of it and then you try to create a DDA, for example, your new baseline is going to be whatever the values are today.
Just to embellish a little bit further, because both Jennifer and Dan's comments are very good on that. You have something right now, the TIFA going, and for all the reasons that have been explained, it's been in place for years. The plan is in place. The mechanisms are in place. That baseline from which the tax increments are measured has been established. Could you have a new TIF plan in the future, or a new TIF of some form? Yes, you can, but as I said, you are starting from scratch. And when you start from scratch, you have both all the administration as well as the risks that go along with that. There's public hearings involved. Again, you basically have to start from square one. And the risk that Jennifer raised is very real, because we are seeing it happen really throughout the state. It's not just a Macomb County thing, it's an Oakland County thing, it's an Eaton County thing. I mean, it's happening all over. And we are seeing that when counties have the opportunity to opt out, and by opt out I mean they can elect to not let their taxes be captured, we are seeing more and more that counties are doing that, saying, no, we know you're good guys and you mean well, but we'd rather spend our own tax money rather than having you take it at the local level and spend it on what you want to do. And one of the opportunities, and maybe even the only opportunity for the county to exercise that opt-out opportunity, is at the very startup. During the original public hearings, when the district is being established and when the plan is being adopted. Once that's happened, the door closes and the county no longer has the opportunity to opt out. They've missed their window of opportunity. But if the current TIFA is terminated and then a decision later on is made to start anew, there is that risk that we could lose the capture of the county money, which is we've estimated here in rough numbers is $100,000+ a year.
Thank you. My next question comes from Laura. Are tax capture vehicles such as TIFA, DDA used in as criteria for grant considerations?
I think so. One of the reasons why I say that, there is an issue out in KPAC right now with trying to get Mill Street repaved. And they're looking for grant money. And so we talked to, and I'm just giving you an example. So we talked to MDOT today about that. And MDOT said, we have this new program coming out, there's 50% match. So we're thinking, okay, where's the match going to come from, right? It's gotta come from the community. So how good is it if you can come up with a match through your TIFA and it's the county's money instead of yours? So I mean, that would be one advantage that I can think of.
Yeah, so previously to working at the league, I worked at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and that was just what you're saying. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it is, you know, sometimes in looking at scoring of projects, looking at, is there an authority there that can help provide those match funds so they don't come out of your general fund?
Okay, great, thank you. The next question comes from Raymond. And I'm gonna, if we keep this TIFA, when will we start building a new city hall, perhaps on King Road? Or redo a building? Now what I think he's saying is, can TIFA be a vehicle to do that? I'm assuming going to.
That's a bigger question than just TIFA. I mean, you have to look at your city's master plan, your city's capital improvement plan. Is that a project that's already been identified, gone through the public comment period? Is that something that the city's already identified as a priority? And then is your TIFA, you know, a tool to use in getting that done? Yes, that could be a possibility, but I don't think the TIFA is what will get you a new city hall built.
Thank you. This is from Sue. Can TIFA funds be spent outside a TIFA district? Question mark. Is the city commission supposed to vote on TIFA proposals, or are they supposed to accept and file? Well, there's two questions there. I apologize. It's kind of hard to read.
I'm not, others may want to weigh in on this. I'm not sure those questions are
I can read it again.
related, but I suspect that the asker of the question intended them to be related.
Okay, I'm going to repeat this, so that way I will do one at a time. How's
All
that?
right.
Can TIFA funds be spent outside a TIFA district? That's question one.
Typically not. That's why you have a TIFA district, and the money is to be kept within the district that you've identified for, as was described earlier, infrastructure projects, primarily economic growth type of projects within the district. So I'll try to keep that answer simple. We'll say no.
Is the city commission supposed to vote on TIFA proposals or are they supposed to accept and file?
Are you, when you
That's
say
all it's
proposals, I assume what you're saying is the development plan. That's what I think you're talking about.
TIFA proposals, I think spending maybe?
So I'm glad that you answered or asked that question, because it's one of my favorite subjects, and I don't have many when I'm talking about TIF, but this is one of the subjects that excites me about TIF, because there have been some issues with some of the TIF authorities, whatever type they are, around the state of Michigan. And so that's one of the reasons why some of them have shut down over time. And basically what it comes down to, I think, is this. There's a misconception about the role and the relationship of the authority to the city council, the city commission, or the board, the township board, if it's a township. And in my opinion, as someone who used to run an LDFA, the authority and the projects in the plan are supposed to be a strategic arm of the community, especially of the city council. The authority should not be run like it's an independent agency. Technically it is, everybody knows that, but it should not be independent. The city and the authority should be working together hand in hand to come up with the list of projects that are supposed to be in the plan. Then the plan gets developed or amended, and then TIFA uses the money to pay for those projects. And then the commission approves their annual budget every year, right? So they're working together. I've seen examples with, say, downtown development authorities. I'm thinking of one in Rochester. During my time when I was in Rochester Hills, different community, by the way, where there was a big issue between the DDA board and the city council because they had a disagreement over how much money they were spending on marketing the downtown. The DDA was spending a lot of money on marketing. The city thought they should have been spending the money on infrastructure. That's an example of an authority that is not a strategic arm of the community. They're doing their own thing, what they think are the priorities, instead of listening to the city and establishing those priorities jointly. So I think that that is a really critical element of any authority, any of those types of authorities. So when the city is developing their capital improvement plan, TIFA should be at the table. The authority should be at the table. Not necessarily providing the input on what they think priorities should be, but listening. They should be listening to the residents, the department heads, the city manager, the city council. This is the community's priority within the district, within the area that the authority has jurisdiction. And then the authority carries it out. So I think that that's really critical and important. But I think another way to answer the question was that the city commission does approve their annual budget every year. I think that's generally what was being asked.
So in the change in law, you will see now authorities are going to be required to, in their reporting, to do a synopsis of what the authority has accomplished in the last year. And in theory, an authority is already talking about what was in its plan, what it accomplished, and what it's proposing to do in the next year in order to get its budget approved by the council. And so now this is just going to be a requirement for more transparency. So when someone wonders, what has our TIFA been doing? Or what is the TIFA doing? What's it accomplished? There now will be information that's easily accessible if it hasn't been in the past. Some authorities are great and very transparent, but it is. I mean, I can tell you when I have council members call me and they think their authorities have gone awry, the first thing I ask is, have you approved their budget? When's the last time you approved their budget? And then I get a big long story. Why is a budget being approved if you're in disagreement of what the authority is doing? If we could legislate relationships, it would be great, but we can't. And so people just need to get along and think about the greater good of the community and what the authority is. Again, that tool to help the council, help the community in moving the priorities that have already been identified in your master plan, in your capital improvement plan. Now the TIFA is a tool to help get those done and moving forward.
Okay, I've got a couple cards here from Cheryl. And Cheryl's asking what lines are a district. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, the boundaries, she's got in parentheses. I'm going to ask that you talk with the TIFA board or city council. These folks here are in from other areas. They probably don't know what our district boundaries are. So that takes care of that one. The second one here is how can the city commission reinstate TIFA? I believe they've asked that already, answered that question. And I'm not sure exactly, I know you're somewhere in the middle. So again, unless you guys want to answer that again, but we've answered about 2 or 3 times on that. So I'm going to go ahead and put these over here. And again, please get with the TIFA district or a city commissioner, somebody that can answer that locally for you, okay? All right, this is from Kathy. Question 1, and I got to get glasses for this. It's too small. Is the establishment or dissolution of a TIFA or DDA usually brought before voters, such as a ballot item, or just delivered, deeded by commission?
It's not usually something that is submitted to voters directly. It is something that is within the prerogative of the city council. Keep in mind, the city council creates the TIFA to begin with, establishes the boundaries, approves the plan, appoints the members to the TIFA board. So consistent with that, the city council ultimately controls the destiny in terms of either extending the duration of the TIFA in the plan, or in this case, terminating it. So it's within the authority of your elected council.
Thank you. The second question that Kathy had, I'm going to read it, but I don't think, I think it's already been answered. Is it helpful to have a DDA or TIFA when trying to secure state and federal grants? And that had already been answered, I believe, by our panel of experts here. And so we're going to move on with that. The next three that I have, or four, I do not have names on them. But I think we have time to quickly go over this. What happens if TIFA monies was used for districts that didn't have money in those districts? In other words, we have 3 districts here and we're in the city. Let's say we used, they needed something for the city. They used funds out of another district to fund a district that had low money or whatever.
Do you have 3 separate plans? 3
Three
separate plans or one TIFA plan for?
We have
cover
3
all-
separate plans.
One plan.
I thought there was 3. 3 districts with 1 plan, I apologize.
So I think the attorney in the room should answer the question, but I can say this, that when I worked for Southfield, they had 2 TIFAs and they had 2 LDFA districts. Many of them were side by side. They were like an extension of an industrial park into another industrial park. You're not supposed to spend money that's earned in one district and another district. Whatever projects are in your plan, they have to provide value to the taxpayers that are providing those taxes. In other words, the property owners within the district are supposed to benefit from the improvement. That's why you're not supposed to spend the money outside of the district to repave a residential road, because that isn't going to benefit, let's say, the business owners that are in the district, right? So that would be my kind of basic answer to it, but he might have a better answer.
I may be the attorney in the room, but my non-attorney friend here, I think, answered the question very well.
Okay, thank you. Why was this forum not held where the TIFA board needed, excuse me for a minute. Why was the TIFA forum not held when the TIFA board needed to do their due diligence before it was voted to be ended? Again, it's an internal question. These guys, I don't believe, would know that. Can TIFA districts' money be used for other, no, sorry. I already answered it. Can any city commissioner here that voted to dissolve TIFA explain why they wanted to dissolve TIFA? I'm not going to even entertain that one either on behalf of them, for their, that you can take up with the city council meeting Thursday night, if that's what you choose. Got a couple other ones here, and then unless anybody has any other questions after these two, I think we've asked all the questions that we have. This next one here comes from Laura. Can the city commission dictate or interfere with the granting or denial of TIFA funding by the TIFA board if they are within their budget and not encumbering city assets? Anyone want to tackle that one?
That sounds very similar, perhaps a variation of the question that was asked earlier that I thought Dan Casey did an excellent job asking. It's about relationships and cooperation. Although the TIFA is under the law an independent body in the sense that it can sue and be sued, and it can issue, can issue and sell bonds, it can do that type of thing. In that sense, it's independent, but at all times, it's also a subordinate arm, instrument of the city. As I mentioned before, the city council creates the TIFA by ordinance, by adopting the plan, by creating the district, by appointing the board. Through some of the other answers we've talked about how the budget that the TIFA develops ultimately has to, or at least it's supposed to, be approved by the city council on an annual basis. So the law is designed for them to be working arm in arm. If the city council has concerns about the direction that the TIFA is going, or about their programs and so on, those types of things are typically weeded out, I guess, first by the appointment process, who's appointed, who's reappointed to the boards, but then ultimately on an annual basis through the budgeting process, again, going through the programs and doing it. So theoretically, if the city council approves the budget and the TIFA board is moving ahead with programs and expenditures which were budgeted projects and expenditures and were approved, then typically those projects and those expenditures should move ahead without any interference. So after the budget's been approved, that's true, but up until that point, if the TIFA wants to do something, it needs to have it in its budget, and that is fair game, and that's open for discussion and deliberation and ultimately approval by the city council. I don't know if I answered the question that the asker was intending. I was trying to I was trying to make the best sense out of it as I could. As I said, it did seem like it was a variation of an earlier question that Dan fielded.
You did good on that. I appreciate that. Okay, this is from, I'm guessing Louise. I'm having a hard time reading it. If money has been expended, for a minute here, because I can't read this right. I apologize. Okay, if money has been spent beyond the TIFA districts, what would the consequences be? What could the consequences be?
That's a legal question.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's something that there's the factual inquiry. Usually that type of information would come out, whether there has been an expenditure outside the district. I mean, first you'd be looking at the budget. That's something that I would expect that is part of the annual audit of the city's finances, and it would include the TIFA. That's something that the auditing firm would be looking to correlate the expenditures with the law to make sure that it's being done properly and that the paperwork all matches up and so on. And that would probably be the triggering mechanism right there. And if the expenditure has been unlawful, yes, there could be consequences. I don't necessarily want to talk here about criminal law consequences. I don't think the local constable is going to come and take anybody away, but an unlawful expenditure outside of the district certainly could jeopardize the longevity of the and viability of the TIFA, and could even result in having to pay back the money that was unlawfully spent, if it's determined to be unlawfully spent.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm going to give Jennifer a daunting task, if you would do this for me. I have this PowerPoint here. It's 7 points, 7 pages of about 5 points each page. And I have somebody here that Terry has asked that, could you ask the panel to discuss the bullet points?
So I'm not familiar with TIFAs or tax increment finance authorities in other states. So I cannot speak to what's going on in other states. I know that they may call them something different, but capturing that increment of value above and beyond what's set at the baseline, that is something that is done in other states. The laws in other states are different compared to where you're at, but I don't know the particulars.
Well, as an economic developer, I can tell you that every state, not every state, that's probably incorrect. Many states use different types of TIFAs for some of the same things, to pay for public infrastructure and so forth. So that's very common. As for the last bullet point, I would disagree with that. I'm almost positive that in Southfield, after I left the community, they eliminated their 2 TIFAs because they essentially completed the projects in the plan and no longer saw a need to continue with the TIFAs. I'm almost positive they did that. And I know that there are others in the state where they did the same thing. And many of them have like a limited, like brownfield TIFAs, for example, they have a limited life. So it's based on what the costs are. Once you're done paying for those costs, then it goes away. There's no point in continuing it.
Just to that point though, would you say a TIFA, the actual authority, is different than the TIF capture? So the TIF capture may not be needed because the project's done, but the authority may still be of use for other things or until a project comes along?
I believe in Southfield that they got rid of the TIFA altogether, the authority.
Okay.
Right.
We got a new one up here. And,
That is true. Schools are made whole. So their taxes, they're made whole. You do not pay more taxes. This is not an assessment like a principal shopping district. Businesses, or this is not a business improvement zone, so this is not an assessment again. So no, you're not paying more taxes. Now, somebody who buys a property, who comes along after the TIFA's been in town and has been doing some good work, property values hopefully have gone up. So that in theory, but no, you're not paying more taxes because of a TIFA.
I don't want to confuse the issue, but with the DDA, which is not a TIFA, of course, but with the DDA, you can assess 1% millage rate on property owners within the district. So there could be some confusion with people because in the DDA, you can do that. But that's the only one of the TIF types that exist in Michigan where you can do that.
okay. I think this one is pretty much, we've hit all these bullet points. Can we go to the next one, please? If we dissolve this in December of 2018, what happens? Your taxes will not go down, is that true? Property taxes doesn't go down?
Correct.
Okay. City realizes a gain of 51,165, constituting a net annual loss of 21,699. That has not actually, those are numbers that are being thrown out there. I can't say that that's exactly the loss. Some say it's higher, some say it's lower. We just don't know yet. But it ain't gonna be pretty. Okay, the next slide, please. Everything said we will reestablish a new TIFA in the future. We've already answered that question about a new TIFA in the future, so go ahead and go to the next slide, please. These are our panelists here. We've done a great job, and appreciate all that you guys have done. Go ahead, Dan.
There's one other point I want to make. I mean, I am not familiar with your development plan at all. I've never read it. I've never seen it. But I was responsible for a development plan in my previous employment. And I think there's one way to look at using TIFAs to support some of your general fund activities that you may or may not be doing. I don't know. One example of that is you're doing snow plowing of the streets within your districts. And I don't know who's paying for that, but that is an eligible expense. You can use your $51,000 of city capture basically to pay through TIFA to pay for that, right? So instead of the city just offering the service for free, they can charge TIFA whatever the cost is for maintaining the roads. One of the things that we did in Rochester Hills is we amended our plan for our LDFA, which is an industrial park. And one of the projects we put in that plan was to do concrete slab replacement. I know that sounds boring, but basically as concrete ages, it starts to crack, right? And normally what a city does is they will bundle together all of their minor repair projects into a contract, and they issue a contract to someone to go out and take care of all these little issues all around the community, right? But they're paying someone to do that. So what we said is, why should the city be spending their Act 51 monies to do that when we can use the taxes that we're generating in the LDFA district to pay those costs? So what that did is it freed the city, some of the city's general fund money up to be spent on other road projects in other places. Not a lot of money in this case, but still, you know, it could cost $100,000 to do, you know, a few concrete slab replacements in the district, right? So it could be snow plowing, it could be road improvements, it could be, you know, blowing out the fire hydrants or repainting the fire hydrants. There can be a whole variety of maintenance things that the city can essentially contract out to TIFA to do, or the other way around, and then that will save some of the city's tax capture to be used on other things. That's assuming you don't already have enough projects in your plan to use all of your money. Hopefully that didn't confuse anybody.
I have one late card that just came in, if I can, and it's from Heather. Am I right to, after listening to all that has been said, the taxes on the existing districts will not go down, and that the city will lose all the funds they now use for paying their staff?
So your taxes will not go down. They won't. Your taxes are what your taxes are. I don't think anyone up here is familiar with the TIFA budget and the city budget and that relationship of what is being paid for through the TIFA. So I don't think we can answer that.
That is correct. All right, that's all I have tonight. As far as question goes, I would ask that the city council members, commission, I always mess that up, sorry. If you guys have any questions, council members only. For the panel, I will allow 2 questions each, just to keep things going, if you have any. Go ahead.
Right now, our TIFA is paying a portion of the salary of our city administrator, our treasurer, and our clerk. And they're under contract to get that amount of money. So if the TIFA goes away, the city still has to pay what they are contracted to pay those employees, are they not?
So the question I would have is, you're generating what was the number, $158,000 a year?
168, yeah.
Okay, and of that portion, about 100,000 is county money? Is that correct?
No, I think the 168 is county.
No,
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 go ahead.
about 120.
120, yeah.
So the question is any of the money that is county money being used to pay those salaries?
No.
I don't know the answer, but the question,
no,
So it's not,
coming out
right?
of the city portion. But when that money goes back to the city, they still have to pay those employees.
so my point is, as long as you're not using any of the county money, the rest of the money they're capturing is city money anyway. It's just being restricted to being used by the TIFA. So if you get rid of TIFA, you're still gonna have the same amount of money available to continue to pay salaries and all those. The money's still there,
But those
it's just
people
not
are-
going through TIFA anymore.
Those people are under contract. And my question was, they still have to honor those contracts.
So to answer it a little bit different way, that employee's salary is what it is, and the city's required to pay that while they are employed. It just would be that maybe part of the funding source that they've been using to help pay that salary would go away. And so they would have to find a different funding source within the city to fulfill that obligation.
Is there any other commissioners? It's hard for me to look out there that would have a question. Go ahead, sir.
The question is to clarify something that I've heard here, and that is the TIFA money for maintenance or infrastructure work has to be done in the TIFA district. But then we just talked about the fact that snow plowing and various things, I assume that still would only have to be in the actual districts again, so you wouldn't pay for all of it, you pay for the parts that are in. Thank you.
Is there any other commissioners? Okay. Well, everybody, I thank you. It's been an informative night, and I hope that all the questions that these folks have answered and put forward to you helps understand TIFA and the laws coming up. Thank you, guys. We appreciate coming to Marine City. And, thank you.